The night of March 20th, 2026, marked a sharp and deeply unsettling turn in the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel, as residents across central Israel experienced a type of attack that analysts say could fundamentally reshape the trajectory of the war. At approximately 11:47 p.m. local time, air raid sirens sounded across Tel Aviv and surrounding metropolitan areas, a now familiar warning that incoming missile threats had been detected. But within minutes, it became clear that this was not a routine exchange in an already volatile conflict. What followed introduced a new level of complexity and danger: the deployment of cluster munitions deep within Israel's urban core. Eyewitness footage from cities including Rehovot and Petah Tikva captured a night sky filled not only with interception flashes, but with dozens of glowing fragments descending rapidly toward the ground. Unlike previous missile strikes that resulted in singular explosions, this attack produced multiple simultaneous detonations across wide residential areas. Emergency services reported at least 17 people injured, several seriously, as fires broke out in multiple neighborhoods and damage spread across a broad radius. According to initial assessments by the Israel Defense Forces, multiple ballistic missiles were launched from western Iran. Israeli air defense systems, including Arrow and David Sling, were activated promptly, maintaining what officials described as a high interception success rate. However, the nature of the incoming payload rendered traditional metrics of success increasingly irrelevant. The missiles carried cluster warheads, which are designed to release numerous smaller submunitions mid-air. Even when interception occurs, the fragmentation of the warhead can still result in widespread ground impact. Witnesses described a sequence of events that underscores this challenge. Interceptors successfully struck incoming missiles at high altitude, but seconds later the sky filled with secondary objects, submunitions dispersing over large areas. These small explosive devices descended rapidly, detonating upon impact or shortly thereafter. The resulting pattern was one of dispersed destruction rather than concentrated impact, complicating both defense and emergency response efforts. Cluster munitions are widely regarded as among the most controversial weapons in modern warfare due to their indiscriminate nature. Each missile can release between 18 and 24 submunitions, depending on configuration, scattering them across a radius that can extend hundreds of meters. In densely populated areas, this significantly increases the likelihood of civilian casualties and infrastructure damage. The events of March 20th marked the first confirmed instance in this conflict of such weapons being used against major population centers within Israel's interior. The implications extend beyond the immediate physical damage. Military analysts note that Israel's multi-layered air defense systems are designed primarily to intercept singular threats: ballistic missiles, rockets, or drones. Once a cluster warhead disperses its payload, the defensive challenge multiplies exponentially. Each submunition becomes an independent threat, too small and too numerous for existing systems like Iron Dome to effectively engage. This shift introduces a troubling strategic dynamic. The cost disparity between offensive and defensive systems becomes more pronounced. A single missile equipped with cluster munitions is relatively inexpensive compared to the high-cost interceptors used to neutralize it. Even when interception is technically successful, the submunitions can still reach the ground, causing damage and casualties. This raises concerns about the long-term sustainability of Israel's defense posture under sustained use of such tactics. In Rehovot, located approximately 20 kilometers south of Tel Aviv, emergency responders were dispatched to multiple sites within minutes of the attack. Reports described shattered windows, vehicle fires, and structural damage to residential buildings. In Petah Tikva, similar patterns emerged, with submunitions impacting across several neighborhoods. Bomb disposal units were deployed to identify and neutralize unexploded ordnance, a process that can take days or even weeks depending on the extent of contamination. The presence of unexploded submunitions introduces a prolonged hazard for civilians. These devices can remain dormant for extended periods, detonating upon disturbance. Historical precedents in regions such as Lebanon and Laos demonstrate that such remnants can pose risks for decades. Children are particularly vulnerable, as the small size and sometimes distinctive appearance of submunitions can lead to accidental handling. Humanitarian organizations responded swiftly to the developments. Amnesty International issued a statement condemning the use of cluster munitions in populated areas, describing it as a potential violation of international humanitarian law. Human Rights Watch echoed these concerns, emphasizing the indiscriminate nature of the weapons. The International Committee of the Red Cross reiterated its long-standing position that such munitions are inherently unsuitable for use in civilian environments due to their wide-area effects and the long-term risks posed by unexploded remnants. The legal framework surrounding cluster munitions is complex. The Convention on Cluster Munitions, an international treaty banning their use, production, and transfer, has been adopted by over 100 countries. However, neither Iran nor Israel is a signatory, nor is the United States. Despite this, customary international humanitarian law imposes obligations on all parties to distinguish between military and civilian targets, and to avoid disproportionate harm to civilians. Iranian officials responding to international criticism have pointed to past instances in which Israel has been accused of using similar weapons in other conflicts. They argue that the current deployment is a response to ongoing military actions, and should be viewed within the broader context of the conflict. This exchange highlights the contested moral and legal narratives that often accompany modern warfare, where both sides seek to justify their actions while condemning those of their adversary. Beyond the immediate humanitarian and legal concerns, the use of cluster munitions signals a broader shift in the operational approach of the conflict. Early stages of the war saw a focus on military installations and strategic infrastructure. Over time, the targeting expanded to include dual-use facilities such as power stations and communication networks. The introduction of area effect weapons against population centers suggests an escalation aimed at increasing pressure on civilian populations and, by extension, political leadership. Economic implications are also significant. The widespread nature of cluster munition damage complicates recovery efforts. Instead of addressing a single impact site, authorities must manage multiple zones of destruction, each requiring assessment, cleanup, and reconstruction. Insurance mechanisms are strained, particularly as standard policies often exclude war-related damage. Government compensation programs, while in place, may face mounting pressure as claims increase in both frequency and scale. The psychological impact on civilians cannot be understated. The unpredictability and dispersion of submunitions create a heightened sense of vulnerability. Residents who had grown accustomed to the relative predictability of missile interceptions now face a threat that is less visible and more pervasive. The presence of unexploded ordnance further prolongs anxiety as everyday environments, homes, streets, parks, become potential hazards. Strategically, the attack underscores the adaptive nature of modern conflict. As defensive systems evolve, so too do offensive tactics designed to circumvent them. The use of cluster munitions reflects an effort to exploit specific vulnerabilities in Israel's air defense architecture. This dynamic of action and counteraction is likely to continue, raising questions about the future trajectory of the conflict. At the geopolitical level, the developments are being closely monitored by global powers, including the United States. Statements from U.S. officials have emphasized the need for de-escalation while reaffirming support for Israel's security. However, the introduction of more controversial weaponry complicates diplomatic efforts and increases the urgency of addressing humanitarian concerns. As the conflict enters its third week, the absence of a clear exit strategy becomes increasingly apparent. Military operations continue, and both sides demonstrate a capacity for sustained engagement. The resilience of command structures and the availability of resources suggest that the conflict could persist beyond initial expectations. Each escalation introduces new variables, making outcomes more difficult to predict. The events of March 20th serve as a stark reminder of the evolving nature of warfare and the challenges it poses to both military planners and civilian populations. The use of cluster munitions in densely populated areas represents a significant escalation with far-reaching consequences. It raises critical questions about the effectiveness of existing defense systems, the adequacy of legal frameworks, and the human cost of prolonged conflict. As investigations continue and more information becomes available, the international community faces the task of responding to a situation that tests both moral principles and practical capabilities. The night sky over central Israel, illuminated by descending fragments of war, has become a symbol of a conflict entering a more dangerous and uncertain phase, one in which the boundaries between battlefield and civilian life are increasingly blurred.